Hello, and as always, welcome to another episode of the Well Off Podcast. I interviewed Gavin Cheung today, who is the Vice President of CentreCourt. For those that don't know, CentreCourt is a developer. They have several projects on the go. I personally have worked on Transit City, which was a set of 4 buildings in Vaughan at Jane and Highway 7. So I was selling these units a couple years ago, and it's a beautiful project. So Gavin and I, we had a chance to discuss kind of the state of affairs today with pre-construction condos. How are the sales going? How's the construction going? What are some of the bottlenecks and the challenges with COVID? What's reality versus what's in the news? And in terms of like some of the statistics that we're seeing, are people still buying? Who's buying? Is it investors? Is it end users? We covered a lot of ground in terms of pre-construction condo sales in the GTA. So if this is something you're interested in learning about, I think there's a lot of data in here. There's a lot of information for you to take in. I hope you'll enjoy the episode. And again, just a reminder, if you are looking to get some more knowledge on real estate, I do offer some free reports. So all you have to do is go to welloff.ca/report, and there's a whole bunch of stuff you could download there for free. My contact info is also on the website, so you can reach out if you ever want to connect. Enjoy the episode, and I look forward to connecting with you soon. Welcome to the Well Off Podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. Today, I'm here with Gavin Cheung, who is the Vice President of CentreCourt. And if, for those that don't know, CenterCourt is a developer. They have several big projects that you may have heard of: the Forest Hill Condominiums, 55 Mercer, Transit City, and several others. They're one of the top developers in the city, and they currently have 12 projects in various stages. That number might be a little bit different right now, actually. So today, Gavin and I are going to discuss the future, the present, everything to do with pre-construction, condos, that sort of thing. So Gavin, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, well, listen, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on the show, and I followed your podcast and appreciate the chance to share some time with you.
Great. Thank you very much. So the way I like to start off, Gavin, I want to ask you a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, and a few things you remember.
I was anticipating that question because it's one that you like to ask. So listen, my background, not dissimilar to a lot of people in Canada. I'm an immigrant to Canada. So my parents, they moved here from Ireland. My dad's the Cheung part of my name is my dad, obviously, and he came from Hong Kong, where he studied as a doctor. Where he moved to Ireland to study as a doctor, where he met my mom, and the two of them decided after I was born to relocate to Canada when I was only 3 years old. So I've been in Canada basically my whole life, but certainly my whole adult life. And I guess just by way of background, since we're on a real estate podcast, the reason that my parents relocated, despite my dad being a doctor, was for a change of careers. So he did the very, very odd thing of becoming a doctor and then realizing his passion was in real estate. I know I've heard a number of your guests sort of have interesting narratives on how they get into the world of real estate. My dad is probably one of the more interesting ones, but he went from medicine into real estate and had a passion on coming into what he calls the new world. It's a very interesting way of looking at it. But he moved to North America and specifically liked Canada, the opportunity saw, and without some of the drawbacks of our neighbors to the south. And initially that was a short-term move, but it turned out to be obviously not a short-term move. 30 years later, 35 years later, we're all still here. So, my upbringing has been in Toronto, with constant trips back to Hong Kong, where my dad's from, or Ireland, where my mom's from, and keeping one foot in the past, but certainly putting down our roots here. I grew up in the city. I did study abroad for a portion of my undergraduate, but then came back to Toronto, where my at the time girlfriend was, and now wife, and we've put down roots here and plan to live in Toronto the rest of our lives. I took a more direct route into real estate than my father. I from a very young age was immersed in real estate, was interested in it. Had a keen interest in it, and always had it in the back of my mind as something I knew I was going to get deeply involved in and was passionate about. So, my career arc was that led me to where I am today. Started off in law school, where I was taking only real estate law courses, and I did a joint degree with an MBA where I was focused on the real estate courses, anything I could take, and had a great exposure academically to law, to real estate, both on the legal and business front, and then ultimately went into a finance role in investment banking in a real estate group at National Bank of Canada, where I, sort of learned the technical side of the numbers behind financial modeling, specifically in the real estate sector, before going out on my own, doing an entrepreneurial endeavor, trying to buy a business that took me probably 2 years to raise the capital, and then ultimately return the capital at the end of the period, knowing that we'd searched and found that the market was that there wasn't a target that was exciting for us at the time. At which point I was looking around for my next step, and CentreCourt was the natural fit. I had my eye on them for a very long period of time. CentreCourt is an amazing place to work. It's an entrepreneurial developer, and in the 5+ years that I've been here, has gone from one of the most promising developers in the city to a household name and one of the largest developers in the GTA. And it's been an exciting period for the company's history, and for me personally to be involved in as we've grown our portfolio and continue to execute on our market.
Awesome. Yeah, I have a lot of questions to ask you about CentreCourt and whatnot. But before we do that, I'm just curious about your dad. You said he was involved in real estate. Was he an investor or was he a realtor? In what way was he involved in real estate?
Yeah, so he was coming from Hong Kong, where it's been, if you talk to any expats from Hong Kong, it's who are Chinese and whose parents lived in Hong Kong for the period where the power was with communist China. There was always a long-standing interest in getting abroad, and for a variety of reasons, including just the potential, which I think is causing headlines today, of change in Hong Kong that would impact real estate more than anything. So the idea, he was interested in real estate, he was passionate in real estate, and the idea of investing became a global question for him. It wasn't, do I invest only in Hong Kong? That wasn't his mindset. And so when the opportunity came to be in Canada as an investor, to answer your question, it was something that obviously he did his homework on a number of places and landed on a place where we view it as an amazing long-term place to be a real estate investor and to live.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. So let's continue on your journey here with CentreCourt. I can tell you my first exposure to CentreCourt was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I was actually selling units at Transit City. So I think it was phase 1 of Transit City, and there was like a ton of people. Everybody was going crazy. You guys sold all your units in the first couple of weeks or something like that. I forget what it was. So that's when I realized that you guys are a pretty big developer. So if you want to tell us a little bit about CentreCourt and your role there, we can start with that.
Sure. So let me start with my role, and then I'll talk at length about the company. So my role is I'm a vice president here at CentreCourt, and I oversee certain key elements of operational groups at CentreCourt, but my main role is in an execution capacity from front to back. So I'm glad we crossed paths at some point, in Transit City, and I'm sure in the future. But I'm involved in the project from the period where we commence, acquisitions and look at it from a financial perspective and engage in negotiations with the landowner through the sales window that you referenced, through the development cycle, construction, customer care, financing, the full life cycle. And my role is to make sure that at every touch point we're coordinated as a team and delivering on the promises that we make to our purchasers and our partners in the industry. What that actually means is deep involvement in each of the the sort of functional groups I just described to you, and making sure that everything that goes on isn't done in isolation, that we don't have any silos in our company, that there isn't, one group that's operating in isolation from another, but the exact opposite, that we're doing everything in very tight coordination, so that we're completely in sync, and that the goals that one group are pushing forward are realistic because they're fully integrated and fully involved with the complementary other parts of our company. The classic example is developer that gets slowed down because construction isn't able to proceed because you don't have some sort of approval from the city. That is something that corporately we take very seriously, and making sure we're completely in sync.
Of course. Yeah.
But on your question of CentreCourt, like talking a bit more about CentreCourt, we are a company that I think has come on the radar of people like yourselves increasingly as the company's profile has grown. And that happens in a number of ways. It happens through, public recognition. We were recently recognized, as one of the fastest growing companies in Canada on the profit list. I think we were top 10. Our president was recently named one of the top 40 under 40. We've had incredible growth, and depending on how you look at market share, whether that's by units or by total sales on an annual basis, or projects in development, we're in a very short time span, being a very young company of 10 years, we're at the number 1 or number 2 in market share. All of which I think has been something. It's been a big source of pride for us corporately, but I think it's been one of those very quiet but increasingly loud success stories in our industry, where I think if you're in the space of pre-construction condominiums in the GTA, you certainly know who we are, but I think now in the public consciousness, it's starting to become more of a household name, and people are starting to, just by virtue of the scale and the growth and the execution to date, start to know CentreCourt as more of a household name. And despite being only 10 years old, it's very much feeling that way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. From what I remember, when I was working on Transit City, I believe that CentreCourt owned about 200 acres. So for those that don't know, Transit City is located at Highway 7 in Jane, in Vaughan. And that's a developing area. They recently had the subway kind of extended to that area and beyond. So am I accurate in saying that you guys own 200 acres of land there?
So the Transit City project in particular, we're really fortunate to have a joint venture partner in Smart Centres. Mm-hmm. So Smart Centres owns a very large, about 100-acre site in and around the development of Transit City.
Okay.
That broader master plan community is one that has everything, everything under the sun. We're talking about the residential component, and that's the part that you were involved in and I was involved in. Smart Centres, who are just incredible partners, have this vision for something that is much bigger than just the residential component. Mm-hmm. That is already, frankly, taking shape, because the way that Vaughan has managed that has just been visionary along with our partners. They've built all of the infrastructure before they've built the residential component. So mm-hmm. It's very rare. I actually can't think of a single opportunity outside of Transit City where you're able to come in and be the residential joint venture partner in the form of Transit City for a site that not only had existing roads, infrastructure, a subway, AAA office location, a YMCA on your doorstep, mm-hmm. But still, and by the way, a 10-acre park that's coming in as well that Smart Centres is building in conjunction with the city of Vaughan. Having all of that plus, like the growth potential and being right at the subway, it was such a unique project. And you're right, it was one that was reflected in the sales velocity, because I think people saw that vision, people saw the bigger story about what 5 years ago was just a vision, and today is buildings that are registered, populated, are fully tenanted, and are very, the YMCA is there, the office is there, great tenants are in place. That sort of vision that Smart Centres brought to the table, and we were fortunate to play a role in executing on the residential component. It's really a very unique one in the context of Toronto and the GTA. So, mm-hmm. we were very excited to have that opportunity and continue it after the launch you're talking about. We ended up launching 2 more towers with Smart Centres, and have continued to grow that corner of Vaughan.
What was it competitive earning that joint venture, that contract with Smart Centres, or like how did that? I don't know if you were involved in all that.
So every joint venture partnership that we choose to enter into is done with a lot of consideration, and it has to be the right marriage. So it's not just about whether it's a competitive process, because often there's a direct discussion and you're the only ones at the table, and then in other instances, it's a very, very competitive process. But regardless of how many people are at the table or how the negotiations go, for us it's really singular in terms of how we evaluate that deal. It's are they the type of complementary partner that that you will have a good working relationship with, and that you can have success, because there are a lot of different ways to develop promising land in Toronto. There's a lot of different ways to spend your time, and you have to spend that time wisely. It's your most precious commodity. You have to allocate your time and make sure that you're developing properties with people that are going to have your same shared vision and values. Mm-hmm. So while I won't comment specifically on how the joint venture was formed on Transit City, but I will say that anytime we get together with a joint venture partner, which is one of our favorite ways to develop land, we look for the marriage first and foremost, and then make sure that the execution of that is done in a way that sets you up for great alignment and great outcomes.
Right. Yeah. So one thing I'm curious about, we haven't really touched on it, but how has COVID and all the recent activities and whatnot impacted your business and your sales? Because obviously, like as a realtor, I see that the market for freehold properties is increasing substantially at this time. However, we have noticed a slight decrease in demand for condos, specifically in the GTA or in Toronto more so. So how has your business been impacted?
So I'm gonna narrow your question. I know you're because I think you asked about the business more broadly, but I think I'll focus on sales, because construction is there. I could go on for an entire podcast about how you need to. But
I think that's important too to discuss that as well.
Well, on the construction front, it's it's an incredible challenge because of the way that it's like a finely tuned machine to get these buildings done on the schedules that are required to meet the promises we make. Mm-hmm. Everything has to go well, which is a challenge without COVID. So when you have supply chains disrupted, when you have people getting sick, or even just being scared of being sick, which is completely understandable. When you put in precautions on site, when you make it so that those precautions limit meetings, limit the ability to be boots on the ground, limit the number of people who can go into a hoist, limit any number of things that just create practical bottlenecks for construction. It's a challenge. And then just the overall level of apprehension that creeps in from time to time, whether or not there's an actual sickness on site. So it's been a challenging year from a construction perspective, but I can say it's also been one where, it's been one of the most gratifying years to see those buildings continuing to rise, mm-hmm. to see people's homes be delivered, people who are banking on those homes, people who have planned their lives around delivery of homes and being able to come through for them. That's been one of the most rewarding things, I would say, about, despite the challenges, being able to cut through. And, just this past year, we were able to deliver almost 2,000 units to new purchasers, which is a lot of units. And all of them were on schedule or almost on schedule. There's, some minor tweaks to the schedule, but by and large, the construction story, despite being a lot of time, tears, blood, sweat, and effort, has been a positive set of outcomes at the end of the day. I think just switching gears to the sales side, since you asked, it's really been interesting. It's been, I think, one of those cases where it really has been, driven at different times by very different changing sentiments. So let's fast forward, or let's rewind, pardon me, to March, when everyone was in full lockdown. We would have these sort of check-ins with people like yourself, and sort of ask, what's the sentiment out there? What are you hearing? How are things? If we had a project launch today. We actually didn't even get to that question of like, if we had a project launch today, because in March it was assumed that the market was not on the pre-construction front, was going to be almost permanently shut down, was the sentiment. It was so negative. And it's funny, around our company, we always have the phrase, don't get too high, don't get too low, because, it will never be as bad as it seems, nor will it ever be as good as it seems at the top of the roller coaster. And 2020 was a stark reminder of the wisdom of that phrase, because if you took that sentiment I just described to you in March, and then fast forward to July, we actually had enough confidence at that period, on the tail end of some of our colleagues in the industry launching smaller launches, to launch a really ambitious launch in July of this summer, which was 199 Church. And it was in the midst of COVID. In July, it was from a sentiment perspective, it looked like things were coming more under control. This was before the sort of second wave, and so the timing of the summer was a point where we sort of we made the judgment call that the market was supportive and the demand was there, and that people who were interested in this market, who had a long-term lens on this market, had the confidence and the inclination and saw value in the proposition. And we made the judgment call that the summer would be the very first drive-in movie theater launch event in the history of the industry, and did something on the water that was really special. And it all started from a place of acknowledging the work of the healthcare workers that put us in a position to have that that moment in time and have that launch work. And then back to the theme of the roller coaster, to where we are today, I would say your sort of the way you framed the question at the front is on a lot of people's mind, which is, where do we go from here? What are we, what does the market look like for future launches? And it's a question that's on our minds all the time. So when I sit around, the boardroom table that I'm at right now, and we're talking about launching a project and we're looking at the market, what we don't do is we don't look at the headlines. I can tell you that. We don't look at the headlines of newspapers and try and base our decisions on that. Because I think what's really interesting and what we do focus on is when you look at the data and what that says, and what people that have a real pulse for the market are saying. So if you look and just take a look back at the data from 2020, it tells a very different story from what the headlines tell you. Pricing, there's been ups and downs. 2020 as an aggregate is a story not dissimilar from 2019 or the 10 to 15 years before that. It was a story of price inflation in the pre-construction market. Overall, and that's just, for me, it's the most amazing story of the resiliency of our market. The fact that despite a year in 2020 that's completely unprecedented, that we actually saw price inflation, and in third quarter, the highest volume of pre-construction activity in the history of our market. Those two factors are ones that, when we take a step back and we say, what's the health of our market, not just in the long term, where I think we all see the secular trends that make Toronto an amazing place to invest and to build your career and to invest for the long term in real estate. When we look at the short term, and I'm defining that as 2020, it's a story that is much more positive than the headlines would ever suggest. It's one where, while the headlines are very important for sentiment and for the timing of any specific one, we have this underlying confidence that the fundamentals of our market are as strong as they have ever been. Mm-hmm. And we have to do what any wise person would do as a purchaser or as a developer, which is find the time where people have the long-term lens that they're looking at the market and have that long-term outlook, and also have the practical ability to direct their mind and attention to what is, for most people, the single largest investment that they'll make, which is a condo purchase. So you do certainly have to react to something like COVID-19 in the context of that, because people need to be focused, they need to be thoughtful, they need to be fully engaged and walking through in their mind what's the most important capital allocation decision of their lifetimes for many people when they invest in a home or in a condo. And taking that, of course, requires a conducive environment where the headlines aren't scaring them and keeping them up. Because that's the last thing you want as a developer, is to have a bunch of purchasers who have buyer's regret. Nobody wants that. We want to launch in a time frame where people feel great about their investment. But where we do take a lot of comfort is in the data, looking at that data, analyzing that data, looking past the headlines, knowing that the headlines are of course important, but that the sentiment will ultimately, in the long run or in the very short run, turn on a dime and reflect reality over the long run, over that long run.
Yeah. And do you have data on the demographics of your purchasers? Do you know typically, like, the people that are buying your units in Toronto right now, are they younger people? Are they older folks that are buying for their kids? Do you have any of that information?
We collect some information by virtue of what we're allowed to collect, and other factors just you're not allowed from a privacy perspective.
Right.
So we have I think as good a feel without formal means and methods of our purchasers, just by virtue of the approach, the consistent approach to delivering value.
Yeah.
A lot of our purchasers are repeat purchasers. A lot of our purchasers are people who have been with us since our early days, who have seen the evolution of the company, have learned to appreciate some of the things that are unique about CentreCourt, the way that we deliver on our promises, deliver on timeframes that are industry leading, that you invest and you see a building 3 or 4 years later, and you don't move in on interim occupancy. You get to actually own it, and you get to close on your unit, and you don't fees in the form of interim occupancy that is unique in the industry. Most people, in fact, I think just about every developer has an interim occupancy period that we do not have never had. So we do see and have a great feel for that repeating demographic. And then in terms of the broader trends, it's typically people who are who have the ability to invest in a unit, either for themselves or for their children, and view it as a long-term investment. And typically, if I had to pick an archetypical purchaser, it's someone in their late 30s, early 40s, and knows that they want to put money away for what they view as a great long-term hold.
Sure. And do you I know you might not be able to share this, or you may not have this data, but do you know approximately what % of your purchases were for 2020 were done by investors versus actual homeowners or whatnot?
Yeah, it's a question that's it's another instance of where the headlines are completely at odds with reality. You hear about the foreign investor all of the time. I read about it, and I won't comment on other developers. I can only talk for ourselves. We have, but I suspect this is true across the industry. In fact, I know it is. Everyone who wants to get a construction loan to build their development, which is every single developer, needs to find a bank that's going to underwrite their purchasers and go through every single agreement and look at the agreements and take it with the lens of, to your question, are these people credible buyers? Are they going to live in the building? And without that process, I would have a lot less confidence saying that, the market is not. It's not, certainly not driven by foreign investors. There's in fact a cap on the number of international investors that you can accept, that the banks will even count towards the obligations of allowing you to draw on your construction loan. So it's speaking for ourselves. It's very hard to tell who's an investor or who's an end user. You look and you can't ask them; they're not going to tell you. And ultimately, we don't have great visibility into it. But what I can tell you is it changes. It's very different based on location. Some locations, if it's directly beside a university, and the major draw of the development is that it will be an incredible investment in the long term as a very stable proxy for student residences. That's the type of building that's going to be seeing more investors.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at the project you were on, for example, on Transit City, it's majority end users. It's people who saw the chance to live in an amazing new neighborhood, but have an affinity to Vaughan and have the opportunity to live in a place they've always felt like was home, but live in a high rise, which they've never had the chance to do, right on the subway, surrounded by amenities. That sort of, so the answer is specific to the building in many regards. Sure. I'll say, the majority of our time and energy goes into thinking about the end user rather than the investor in the way that we create our spaces, and certainly in the programming. For example, in our upcoming launch of 8 Wellesley, which is, it's the one that's going to be the bellwether for the 2020 launches, will be likely the very first project out of the gate. It's a project that's, it's got all of the amenity programming, whether that's the location, the fantastic location just on the subway, whether it's the fact that it's surrounded by restaurants, retail, from the most exclusive in Yorkville down to the faux restaurant you can get on Yonge Street.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the amenity program that has an amazing gym, and it has an amazing workspace, a shared co-working space. All of those things are focused on the end user, on the belief that we're selling to end users and as well as investors. So it will likely be one of those buildings where it's rapidly sold to a mix of both investors and end users.
Sure. And just projecting for this year, do you see yourselves maybe delaying some projects, delaying the sales or anything of that sort at this time? Or is everything good to go, green light for everything? You're still full, going ahead full speed?
We will listen to our partners in the industry, which is guys like yourselves, and we're in constant discussions with people like yourself about how we want to approach a sales launch. So we do, I think, as much background research on our product going into the launch, making sure that it's tailored for the right market. And then the actual timing of it will depend on sentiment, and it will depend on how we feel about what the future looks like. And in the case of today's market, COVID is a big part of the discussion. And as I mentioned at the top, having a government shutdown, it's difficult to do a launch. We've proven, and I think the industry's proven by virtue of the third quarter that we have, that the pandemic doesn't stop our market or the thirst and desire to be in the market, and for savvy investors to have a long-term purchase on their minds, knowing that the delivery of this product is, in the case of CentreCourt, 3 to 4 years out. In the case of the industry more generally, probably 4 to 5 to 6 or more years out. So, I think, in terms of does it delay launches? It has the potential to delay launches, but it's a picture that changes quite rapidly. And what we've done philosophically is we've been ready to launch multiple launches, and when the market is conducive and ready, and people are able to take care of their kids, through putting them back into school and have the full mindset and capacity and willingness to sit down and look around and fully survey the landscape and say, where do I want to put my capital? What do I believe is a judicious use of my family's finances? How am I going to set myself up for success? That they'll come back to the answer that yes, now is the time to buy, now that I have, the headspace and don't have a kid running around my living room. Now is the time where I'm willing to get back into the market. But we listen to to trusted advisors like yourself. We listen to our purchasers who are often, through our website asking us, when are you launching? When can I buy? Who do I talk to? When are the floor plans released? We have a great feel for when that is, and we're very responsive to that feedback.
Awesome. Good. Well, good luck with all your projects and everything. I know you guys are doing a great job. We're going to jump ahead to the next section, which is the random 5. So I'm going to ask you 5 random questions and you just tell me the first thing that comes to mind. Okay. So number 1, what's the last adventure you went on?
The last adventure I went on, I would say the last adventure I went on was to the Amazon. And this was so. Let me caveat all this, but I used to be much more adventurous before I had 3 children. So in the pre-kid era, I was traveling as much as I could, and I would say going to the Amazon is probably the most adventurous. We stayed, it was by no means glamping. We were given a guide, and we went into the middle of the Amazon, and we had a few days that was at times thrilling, at times terrifying.
Yeah.
Even just getting there was quite an adventure, let alone once we got boots on the ground and realized what wasn't included in the package that we thought was. So I would say, that would be sort of the classic adventurous thing. And then more close to home in my more mature child caring years, I would say the adventure of trying to balance the challenges of this past year has been quite an adventure. Having 3 kids, a very understanding wife, and both of us in very demanding jobs has been an adventure in and of itself.
Yeah, and now I can see why you're in your office as opposed to working from home.
That's right.
Cool.
That's right.
So number 2, who in your life has had the best luck?
I would say we've all had, so in my family or in my life?
In your life.
Yeah, I would say I would go back to my family regardless. Like my family, I feel very fortunate to be in a very close family. And, as a person, my answer is that my mother and father are probably the most lucky, not because they had me by any means, but because I think they've just been very pleased with how, they grew up, and they had a big family, and they made a lot of major decisions. The decision to immigrate, the decision to be one of those people that are driving the condo market, to come in and be an immigrant and build their life and start something fresh and take a leap of faith with a mixed race couple moving, at the time was very odd, moving to Canada, to a new country, taking a big bet, and having everything work out, from the long-term outlook that we've had on the Canadian real estate market and the financial fruits that have been born out of that outlook. And more on a more personal note, just having the opportunity and privilege of living in a country where it's incredibly stable compared to anywhere else you look at. We're the sane, wise grandfather of the English-speaking world right now, and it's been such. I see in them, and in particular around the holidays where we're all more reflective about what's gone right in our lives, I see, my family and my parents in particular as having lived a somewhat charmed life.
Awesome. Number 3, what benefit do you bring to the group when you hang out with friends, which you can't really do right now, but either way.
It's funny. I've had the same group of core friends since I left high school, and I think we all bring something to the table. I think, in when my guard is down and I'm with my dearest friends, long-term friends, it's typically myself that's bringing some a dry joke to the table, and it's other people that will bring up more philosophical topics, and we'll go back and forth. And one of the great things about sort of having a group of friends that's been solid over the years has been watching my friends grow, and watching all of us celebrate our mutual successes and wins. And just as luck would have it, a lot of my close friends, not by design, these guys were friends before we were professionals, they're all in our industry, or a lot of them are in our industry. And having the opportunity to seamlessly walk through, from the long-term friendship basis into really respected outlook on their professional wins, losses, strategies, thoughts, hopes, wishes. All of that has been, has been really great. It's been interesting to watch, and we still have the healthy debates that we've always had. Just now, they're not just about who you're dating. It's now about our market, our condo market, and beyond.
Sure. Yeah. And it's a great industry for all of you guys to be involved in. So good for you. Number 4, what makes you feel old?
Increasingly, a number of things. My waistline and my children being of top 2. Yeah. I don't actually feel old. I feel very invigorated. So CentreCourt is a company that is we're young as a company, as I mentioned to you. We're 10 years old, and within that company, I'm 38. I'll be 38 in February. I'm one of the gray-haired individuals in the company. I'm one of the we're a company of 50 people, and I'm one of the gray hairs. Both in terms now of longevity at the company, but also in absolute terms, because we have a very young, vibrant team, an open culture, very transparent, no walls. Everyone's got an open concept desk. We try extremely hard to stay in sync, and we push one another. We have very, very high expectations of one another. Being in that sort of environment, surrounded by people that I just find so compelling and so talented and so motivated, I actually feel very young. Like every day I walk into the office, it's invigorating. Obviously, less invigorating when it's an empty office like today. But when we're in our pre-COVID world, and once everyone's vaccinated and we're on the other side of this, I come in feeling very invigorated, very energized, and lucky to be around all these people who are my age or younger.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then the final question is, what success principle do you live by?
Great question. So I actually, like most of my colleagues at CentreCourt, have a very, very long answer for you on that, but I'll just keep it very brief. If you've ever read Ray Dalio, he's got a book called Principles, mm-hmm. and it's you should read it if you haven't already. It's a great read, and I'd recommend it to any of your listeners. It's a very unique way of thinking of the world and thinking about principles that set you up for success, and even rarer, I would say, in terms of how it's practiced. It focuses on a number of key principles, but I would say the very, very one of the bedrock principles is a principle of being transparent with one another. And that's not just with the good stuff, that's with the bad stuff. It means openly bringing to the surface issues and doing it without fear that you're going to be reprimanded anyway, because everyone should know about things that are going wrong so that everyone can direct their attention towards it, and doing it in a very transparent, open culture. That, and the fact that it's a meritocracy, that's principle number 2, that the best idea, it doesn't matter if it comes from me or someone who's been in our company for 5 minutes, or it comes from the CEO that founded the company 10 years ago. If it's a good idea, it's one that's going to be listened to. If it's a poor idea, it doesn't matter your seniority. It will be one that people question and really, really go after and get to the root cause and try and understand your logic and dive in, because we're in an environment, and part of the success we've had is in fact, almost all of the success, any success we've had, has been rooted in these principles I'm describing to you. We're an open, transparent, fast-moving culture, and that has really fueled all our dealings. And you saw it at Transit City. It fuels how we do our business. It keeps us young, to your other points, and makes us feel and and as far as core principles go, that's the short answer. But I encourage you to pick up the book if you haven't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've listened to the audiobook actually, so I'm familiar with what you're discussing, but it's been a while, so I may have to review. But yeah, that's I think that's it for us here. We've covered a lot of ground. Do you want to just let the listeners know how they can reach you and if there's any services that you might provide?
Yeah, so absolutely. You can follow us on just about any social media channel, at CenterCourt or at CenterCourt Inc. And our website, www.centercourt.com. And then more to the point, if you're interested in following our new product, which is going to be 8 Wellesley, launching very shortly, you can reach out to anyone on our sales team. I briefly touched on the opportunity earlier in this call, but it's our next launch. It's coming very shortly. It's one that we're incredibly excited about. It speaks to everything that we've talked about on this call in terms of things that are exciting about Toronto, that are exciting about being on the subway, being transit oriented, being near museums, restaurants, Queen's Park, parks, museums, restaurants, bars, sports, educational facilities, everything. So it is, one of our most exciting, centrally located, right off Yonge Street locations. And I know a lot of people have been asking about it. So if you are interested specifically in 8 Wellesley, I highly encourage you to reach out to myself, or probably better that you reach out to anyone on our sales team, Jason Lamb, or any of the other sales members.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, Gavin, thanks.
That goes for you too, George. I'm sure we'd love to see you as well. I know Transit City was a shared success, and please do reach out on 8 Wellesley.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good. Gavin, thanks so much for your time, and I'll be sure to include all the contact info in the show notes, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it, and stay safe. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks once again for listening to another episode of the Well Off Podcast. Just want to remind you that if you do appreciate the content, all I ask is that you comment, maybe like it if you can on the platform that you're listening to it on, and finally share it with friends and family. I'd love to get the message out there, and it would mean a lot if you can share it. And finally, I just wanted to offer you, as a valued listener, a free copy to the Roadmap to Real Estate Investing, which is a document that I've put together which helps you identify what strategy would best suit your needs at this current time. You go over certain things that are included in this document step by step, and it'll hopefully provide you with some clarity. So have a look. You can go to www.welloff.ca/guide to download your free copy.